I've always loved rainy nights. There's something comforting about the sound of it. Steady, endless, like the world slowing down just for a moment. It makes the house feel smaller, warmer, safer. That night, I thought it would be the same. I made myself a cup of tea, turned off most of the lights, and sat on the couch with a blanket over my legs. The rain tapped softly against the windows, a rhythm I'd known since childhood. Outside, the street was empty. No cars, no voices, just the rain whispering. It was peaceful in a way that made me forget how large the house really was. Every corner, every shadow seemed to melt into the sound of the storm. I remember thinking how quiet everything felt, like the air itself was holding its breath. Then, somewhere above me, the floor creaked. Just once, I froze, listening. It wasn't loud, not even enough to be strange. Old houses make noises all the time. But still, there was something about that single sound that didn't fit the rhythm of the night. I waited for another creak, or the sigh of the wind through the walls. But nothing came. Only rain. I told myself it was nothing. Just wood expanding in the damp air. Just the house settling. But as I leaned back and tried to relax, I couldn't shake the feeling that the silence that followed wasn't empty. It felt like something was listening. I must have dozed off for a bit, because when I opened my eyes, the tea beside me had gone cold. The clock on the wall read just past midnight. The rain hadn't stopped. If anything, it was falling harder now, hammering against the windows in uneven bursts. I sat there for a while, watching the shadows shift across the living room. That's when the lights flickered. Just once. A quick pulse. The lamp dimmed, then brightened again, as if the house had taken a deep breath. I frowned. The power lines in this neighborhood were old, and storms like this often made them stutter. It wasn't unusual. But then it happened again, and again. The light above me began to throb, slower now, like a heartbeat trying to find its rhythm. I turned toward the hallway. It was completely dark, a long stretch of black that seemed to absorb the weak light from the living room. I called out softly, almost without meaning to. "Hello?" My own voice sounded strange, too small, swallowed by the space. No answer. The lamp flickered one last time, then went out. The room fell into total darkness, and for a moment, the only sound was the rain. Heavy, unrelenting, pressing against the walls like a second skin. Then from somewhere near the kitchen, I heard a faint click, like a light switch being flipped, but I hadn't moved. For a few seconds, I didn't move. I just sat there waiting for my eyes to adjust to the dark. The rain outside blurred everything into a constant hiss, and in that sound, it felt like the house itself was breathing. I stood up slowly, feeling for the wall. My fingertips brushed against the cool paint as I tried to remember where I'd left the flashlight. The floorboards creaked beneath my weight, soft, uncertain. Then above me, another sound answered, a single step. It was faint, but clear, the unmistakable groan of a wooden floor under someone's foot. I froze mid-motion, every nerve in my body pulling tight. Another step followed. Slow, careful, right above where I stood. I looked up, though I couldn't see a thing. The ceiling felt impossibly close, as if the sound had pressed it down over me. I tried to tell myself it was nothing. The house expanding, the wind shifting, anything. But deep down I knew the sound of footsteps. I knew the rhythm of human movement. My voice came out thin, almost a whisper. "Is someone there?" The rain kept falling, no reply. No sound, nothing. After a while I told myself again that it was just the house. Maybe the roof had shifted. Maybe a branch had fallen. I took a deep breath and stepped toward the kitchen, determined to find the flashlight and prove to myself there was no one here. But as I reached the doorway, I heard it again, this time behind me. A single step on the stairs and then silence. I stood perfectly still, staring at the staircase. The air in the house felt heavier, colder, like the rain was seeping through the walls instead of just the windows. My heartbeat filled my ears, and for a long time I couldn't tell if the sound I heard next was real or just the blood rushing in my head. Then came another noise, softer, stranger. A faint murmur as though someone were whispering through water. It was coming from the window. I turned slowly. The curtains were drawn halfway open, and the glass glistened with rain. The sound was there, just beyond it, a rhythm that didn't belong to the storm. I stepped closer, careful not to make the floor creak. The whisper grew clearer, though I still couldn't make out the words. It was too low, too close to the rain's hiss. I leaned forward until my breath fogged the window, and then I heard it. A voice, a woman's voice, quiet, broken, almost pleading. "Why did you leave me here?" I stumbled back, my hand slamming against the wall. My pulse thundered in my throat. The words echoed in my mind, but outside, the rain hadn't changed. It kept falling, steady and relentless, as if nothing had been said at all. I waited, seconds, minutes. I couldn't tell, staring at the same spot on the glass, half expecting a face to appear behind it. But there was nothing, just darkness and rain. I told myself again that I was tired, that I'd imagined it, that the mind plays tricks when you've been alone too long. Still, I couldn't help but whisper back under my breath just to be sure. "Who are you?" No answer came, and only the wind pushing gently against the window, as if something outside had just stepped closer. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the window, the rain sliding down the glass, the place where that voice had come from. It wasn't just what she'd said, it was how she'd said it. Like she'd been waiting. Around 3 a.m, I gave up pretending to rest. I needed to prove to myself that I was imagining things. Something logical. Something I could hold on to. I remembered the security camera I'd installed in the living room months ago. A cheap one connected to my phone, recording on motion detection. I hadn't checked it in weeks. Maybe it had caught something. A sound, a reflection, anything. I opened the app, scrolled to the time I'd heard the first noise. The screen showed the same dim room I was sitting in now. Me on the couch. The flickering lamp. Nothing else. Then the light went out on the footage, just like it had in real life. Darkness filled the screen for several seconds, and in that blackness a faint shape passed behind me. At first I thought it was just a glitch, but then I noticed the outline, the curve of a shoulder, the tilt of a head. It moved slowly, deliberately, crossing from one side of the frame to the other. My throat went dry. I turned, half expecting to see something standing there. The room was empty. Back on the phone, I pressed play again, watched the same few seconds over and over. Just when the figure vanished, I heard it. A sound so quiet I almost missed it. Breathing, right behind the camera. Slow, steady, human. I dropped the phone onto the couch. The rain outside had softened to a whisper, but the silence inside the house felt sharper now, like the air itself was listening. That's when I realized whatever had been in the recording wasn't just in the past. It was still here. By the time the first light touched the curtains, I hadn't slept a second. The storm had faded to a light drizzle, and the silence that followed felt worse somehow. Too clean, too careful, like the world was pretending nothing had happened. I told myself that I'd imagined it all. The voice, the shadow, the breathing, the dreams tangled with the sound of rain. It was easier that way. I made coffee, trying to ignore how my hands shook as I poured it. The smell filled the kitchen, familiar and grounding. For the first time in hours, I almost believed things were normal again, until I noticed the back door. It was open. Not wide, just enough for a slice of pale morning light to spill across the floor. I froze, the mug hovering halfway to my lips. I remembered locking it the night before. I was sure of it. I always did. The wind couldn't have done that. The latch was heavy, old metal that stuck unless you turned it just right. I set the mug down and took a step closer. The floor was cold under my bare feet. When I reached the door, I saw muddy prints on the threshold, faint, smudged, leading inward. They stopped 2 steps inside, and that was all. No trail, no water, nothing else. I stood there for a long time, staring at those half-erased marks, trying to find a reason that made sense. Maybe I'd gone out at night. Maybe I'd sleepwalked. Maybe. The refrigerator motor hummed on suddenly, a sharp mechanical buzz that made me flinch. My pulse jumped. I slammed the door shut and locked it again. Then, just to be sure, I checked every window, every room, every closet. Nothing was missing. Nothing out of place. Still, the house didn't feel empty. It felt occupied, and as I stood in the quiet, staring at the rain streaking down the glass, I realized something else. The smell of the air inside had changed. It no longer smelled like coffee. It smelled like damp earth. I tried to shake it off. I told myself I'd been trapped in the house too long, that the storm and the lack of sleep were making me see things that weren't there. Still, The smell lingered, that damp metallic scent that didn't belong. It clung to my clothes, to my skin. I went upstairs to wash my face, hoping the cold water would clear my head. The bathroom mirror was fogged from the shower I'd taken earlier. I wiped it with my hand, leaving streaks across the glass. My reflection looked pale, hollow-eyed, but normal. Just tired. I leaned closer, letting the water run. The sound of it was steady, comforting in a strange way. For a few seconds, I almost forgot how uneasy I'd felt. Then something moved behind me. It was subtle. A shadow, maybe. I turned around quickly, but the doorway was empty. The hallway beyond was still silent. I looked back at the mirror. This time, my reflection wasn't looking at me. Its eyes were turned slightly to the left, focused on something just over my shoulder. My heart stopped. I didn't want to turn around, but I couldn't not. I twisted slowly, forcing myself to look. And again, there was nothing. Just the faint hiss of the running tap. When I faced the mirror again, my reflection was back to normal. Same expression, same eyes, meeting mine perfectly. I stood there for a long time, trying to breathe. Then I shut off the water, grabbed a towel, and left the room. But as I stepped into the hallway, I noticed something that hadn't been there before. A small wet footprint, right behind where I'd been standing. It wasn't mine. I didn't leave the house that day. The rain had stopped, but the sky stayed gray, heavy, like it hadn't decided whether to let go again. I tried to distract myself, cleaned the kitchen, folded laundry, kept the TV on for noise, anything to keep from thinking about that footprint. By late afternoon, I was standing by the front window staring at the street. Everything looked washed out and still. The houses across from mine were quiet, their curtains drawn. Then I saw movement. My neighbor, Mrs. Alden, standing on her porch with an umbrella in hand. She must have noticed me because she waved. I hesitated, then opened the door and stepped out to the porch. The air smelled faintly of wet leaves and rust. "Morning," she called. "You all right? I saw your lights flickering last night." I nodded, trying to sound casual. "Yeah, storm messed with the power again. Thought the house was haunted for a second." I laughed, but my voice cracked halfway through. Her expression didn't change. She just tilted her head slightly. "You live alone now, don't you?" "Yeah," I said. "Why?" She hesitated. "It's probably nothing, but I thought I saw someone else through your window last night." The words landed like ice in my stomach. "Someone else?" She frowned, as if she wasn't sure she should have said it. It was late. Around midnight, maybe later. Two shapes in the window upstairs. One of them was standing by the glass. The other? Just a little behind. I tried to find an answer, any answer that didn't make me sound insane. "You're sure it wasn't the reflection?" "The storm lights, I know what I saw," she said softly. "You should keep your doors locked." Then she turned and walked back inside, closing her door before I could say another word. I stood there on the porch, staring at my own windows. The one she meant was the bedroom. The same one that faced the rain. The same one where I'd heard the voice. That night I couldn't stop thinking about what my neighbor said. Two shapes, one by the window, one standing behind. I replayed her words over and over while pacing through the house, checking every corner like some paranoid fool. Every door was locked, every window sealed, and still the air felt wrong, thicker somehow, like I was breathing someone else's breath. When I finally calmed down enough to sit, I noticed something strange. The basement door was slightly ajar, just an inch, maybe two. I hadn't opened it in months. The sight of it made my stomach twist, but curiosity pushed harder than fear. I took a flashlight and pulled the door open. The smell hit me first. Dust, metal, and something faintly sweet like old flowers. The steps creaked under my weight as I went down. The basement was mostly empty. Some boxes, a few tools, and a shelf covered in cobwebs. But something new sat on the workbench near the back wall. A small cassette tape, unmarked, wrapped in a thin layer of dust. I didn't remember owning a tape recorder, but there was one sitting right beside it, old and gray, the kind with big square buttons. I don't know why I pressed play. Maybe I just needed to hear something that made sense. The tape clicked, hissed, and then a voice, a woman's voice. "I was alone here once," she said. "Until he came back." The words were calm, almost tender. But her tone, it wasn't right. It sounded too close, like she was standing beside the recorder, whispering straight into it. I stopped the tape immediately and stared at it, my hands trembling. The air in the basement felt heavier now, damp and cold. When I turned to leave, I noticed another shelf I hadn't seen before, half hidden behind an old curtain. There were more tapes there, dozens of them lined up neatly, each with a date written in fading ink. The one on the far left had today's date. I didn't touch the other tapes. I couldn't. I just stood there staring at that row of thin plastic spines, each labeled with a date I didn't remember writing. Some of them went back years, others, months that hadn't even happened yet. The longer I looked, the more I felt like the room was tilting around me. My heartbeat filled my head, heavy and uneven. I backed away and left the basement light on, too afraid to turn my back to the dark. Upstairs, I sat on the couch and tried to breathe. I told myself I'd call someone, maybe a friend, maybe the police, but who was I supposed to tell? Hi, there's a stranger's voice on a tape in my basement. They'd think I'd lost it. It was nearly dawn when I finally dozed off, still clutching the flashlight. A noise woke me. It was faint at first, a slow, irregular tapping. I lifted my head, trying to trace it. It wasn't coming from the roof or the windows. It was inside the house, inside the wall. I pressed my ear against the plaster. The tapping stopped. Then after a heartbeat, it came again, 3 sharp knocks, closer this time. I whispered, "Hello?" Before I could stop myself. Silence. Then from the other side of the wall, a voice. Muffled. Hoarse. "Help me get out." I stumbled back, the flashlight falling from my hand. It rolled across the floor, its beam shaking wildly over the wallpaper. I wanted to run. Every part of me screamed to run, but my legs wouldn't move. The voice came again, softer now, desperate. "Please, it's so dark." I covered my ears, shut my eyes, whispered, "No, no, no," over and over like a prayer. When I opened them again, the house was silent. The knocking had stopped, but the wall where the sound had come from, it wasn't smooth anymore. The wallpaper was bulging outward, just slightly, like something underneath was pressing to get through. I didn't sleep after that. I just sat there staring at the wall until the light began to shift from gray to pale blue. Every sound in the house, every groan of wood, every hum of the pipes, felt like a whisper meant for me. When the sun finally rose, I told myself I'd leave. I'd pack a bag, drive anywhere, sleep in my car if I had to. But when I walked toward the front door, the knob refused to turn. It wasn't locked. It simply wouldn't move, like it had fused into the frame overnight. I tried the windows next. None of them opened. Not even an inch. The air inside was heavy, thick with the smell of rain-soaked wood and something else beneath it. Something sour, like rot. That's when I heard it, a long, slow creak from downstairs. I turned toward the hallway and my heart nearly stopped. The basement door was wide open. I know I hadn't touched it since last night. I'd left the light on down there. I could see its dim glow spilling up the steps. But now the light flickered, like it was struggling against something moving in front of it. For a moment I thought about calling out, about saying who's there. But my throat felt dry, useless. Instead, I stepped forward, one slow step at a time until I was standing at the top of the stairs. The air rising from below was cold and wet, and I could hear water dripping somewhere in the dark. The smell of earth was stronger now, mixed with a faint metallic tang like rust or blood. I forced myself down a few steps, shining my phone's light into the basement. The shelves were still there, the boxes, the workbench, all in place. Then I noticed the far wall. The curtain that had hidden the tapes was gone. The shelves were bare. Every single cassette had disappeared. The tape recorder still sat on the bench, though. Its red light was blinking, recording. I stood frozen at the bottom of the stairs, staring at that blinking red light. Recording. The sound of it, a faint mechanical click-click every few seconds, filled the silence in the room. I wanted to shut it off, but I couldn't make myself move. Finally, I forced my hand forward and pressed stop. The machine whirred softly, then fell quiet. For a few seconds, nothing happened. Then the tape inside began to rewind on its own. I stepped back, my pulse hammering. The machine clicked again and started to play. Static, then a voice. My voice. It was the same as I sounded now, my tired, shaking, but the words were wrong. "I found the room," it said. "It's still here." The flashlight trembled in my hand as I turned toward the far corner of the basement. That wall, the one where the knocking had come from, looked different now. The paint was cracked, the plaster damp. I reached out and pressed against it. The surface gave way beneath my fingers like wet clay. Behind it, there was a hollow space. I tore at the wall until a gap opened just wide enough to slip through. Cold air rushed out, thick and stale. I shone my light inside. It wasn't big, maybe the size of a small bedroom. The walls were bare concrete, the floor covered in dust and bits of plaster. In the center stood an old wooden chair and on it a stack of photographs. I picked one up. It was me, standing by the living room window. But in the picture, I wasn't alone. There was someone standing behind me. A woman, her face blurred by motion, one hand resting on my shoulder. I dropped the photo and backed away, but the walls seemed to close in. I glanced around and saw more pictures, tacked to the concrete, dozens of them, all of me. In every one, she was there, sometimes beside me, sometimes half hidden behind a door, sometimes looking straight into the camera. My flashlight flickered. When it came back on, the chair was empty. The photographs were gone, but the damp air around me seemed to shift. The faint scent of rain and something else. Something like perfume curling close to my ear. And then, just above a whisper, I heard her voice again. "You shouldn't have come back." I ran. I don't remember how I got out of that room, whether I climbed, crawled, or tore through the hole I'd made. Only that I was suddenly back in the main part of the basement, gasping for air. The red light on the recorder was off now. The silence pressed in from every direction. I stumbled upstairs, slammed the basement door shut, and leaned against it until my heartbeat slowed. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely grip the knob. Every light in the house flickered again all at once, as if the power itself was reacting to me. Then came the rain. It started so suddenly that I thought for a moment it was thunder, a roar that rolled across the roof, thick and heavy. But this wasn't like before. It wasn't a natural storm. The rhythm was wrong. The drops hit the windows too hard, too fast, like fingertips drumming against glass. I went to the front window and pulled the curtain aside. Outside, everything was soaked in a strange silver-gray light. The streetlights had gone out. The world looked smaller, as if the rain had erased everything past my yard, and in that endless hiss I heard her voice again. At first it was barely audible, a whisper that came and went with the wind. But as I leaned closer to the glass, I could make out the words, "Let me in." I stepped back, shaking my head. No, you're not real." The whisper rose, clearer now, right outside the window. "Let me in." I covered my ears, but it didn't help. The voice wasn't coming from outside anymore. It was inside the house. The whisper became a chorus, faint, echoing, layered like dozens of voices murmuring the same phrase. I stumbled backward, knocking over a lamp. "Let me in. Let me in. Let me in." I shouted, "Stop." And just like that, the sound stopped. The rain went silent. The house was completely still. Then from somewhere behind me, from the direction of the forgotten room, came a single slow knock. 3 beats, even, precise, like a reply. I don't know how long I stood there after the knock. Maybe a minute, maybe an hour. Time didn't feel real anymore. It folded and twisted like the walls around me. Every part of the house seemed to breathe, and every breath sounded almost human. When I finally moved, my feet carried me toward the sound, even though every instinct begged me not to. The floor was damp beneath my steps. Somewhere water was leaking, forming dark trails across the wood. The basement door was open again. A thin stream of water was running down the stairs, each drop echoing like a clock ticking in the dark. I should have turned around. I should have run. But there was something in me, a pull, familiar and cold, that said, "You've been here before." I descended slowly, the air growing colder with each step. The forgotten room gaped open, darker than ever. The chair was back in the center, and sitting in it was the tape recorder. The red light blinked. I pressed play, my hands trembling, static. Then my voice, but it wasn't from tonight. It was older, calmer. I told her to stay. I told her I'd come back for her. I frowned, confused. What is this?" Then another voice answered from the tape, a woman's. "You never did." The static deepened, turning into something like breathing. I backed away, but the sound seemed to follow me. filling the room, pressing against my chest. And then I saw her. She stepped out of the dark corner, the same shape from the photos, from the reflection, from the whisper in the rain. She looked exactly like I remembered her. Same pale face, same quiet sadness in her eyes. "Do you remember now?" she whispered. "You left me here. You promised you'd come back." I shook my head, but the truth hit me before I could speak. The accident. The night I swore I'd fix the leak in the basement. The storm, the fall, the water rising around her while I ran for help that never came. "I tried," I said, my voice breaking. "I didn't mean to." She smiled. Not cruelly, not kindly, just tired. "You never left, you know. You just forgot which side you were on." The light flickered. My reflection shimmered in the wet concrete wall beside her. Only it wasn't following my movements anymore. It was hers. I don't remember screaming, but my throat burned. The flashlight fell from my hand, spinning across the wet floor, throwing light in wild, dizzying circles. When it stilled, she was gone. Only the chair remained, empty, slick with water. The basement was flooding now. A thin sheet of rainwater had begun to pool across the concrete, creeping toward my feet. I stumbled backward, tripping over the steps, clawing my way up toward the door. When I reached the top, I slammed it shut and leaned against it, chest heaving. My reflection in the small glass pane beside the door stared back at me, pale, wide-eyed, shaking. But something was wrong. My reflection blinked a second too late. I backed away, shaking my head. "No, no, no!" The lights in the living room flickered, then died completely. The house exhaled, a long, low groan through the wood and pipes like something stretching awake after a long sleep. I grabbed my phone, hands slippery, but the screen stayed black. No service, no light, nothing. Only the sound of the rain, steady again, calm now, almost gentle. And beneath it, breathing not mine, I turned slowly. In the faint gray light from the window, I could just make out the basement door. It was closed, but water was seeping through the crack at the bottom, spreading across the floor in dark, glistening lines. Then came the sound. Knock, knock, knock. 3 perfect beats, exactly like before. I whispered, barely able to speak. "Please, just leave me alone." The knocking stopped. For a long time, there was only silence. I thought it was over. I almost believed it. Then from the other side of the room, right behind me, a voice spoke softly, almost tenderly. "You were never alone." The recording clicked on somewhere in the dark, and over the hiss of static, I heard my own voice whispering the same words back. "You were never alone."